Today we'll be making a balsamic roasted winter squash and wild rice salad. Let's get started. Our first step today will be making our wild rice. What I'm using is a medium saucepan, and I've got 3.5 cups of water that just came to a boil. You could also use vegetable stock or chicken stock if you prefer, but if you don't have that handy, water will do just fine. I also have 1 cup of wild rice and a little bit of salt to taste. So adding your water first. Once this comes to a boil, we'll add our remaining ingredients. First, let's start with a little salt to taste, and then we'll add in our rice. Giving it a stir. Once it comes back to boiling, we'll turn the heat down, put a lid on it, and let it cook for 45 minutes. You don't have to continuously stir, periodically check on it, but aside from that, after about 45 minutes, it should be good to go. Now that my rice is back to boiling, I'm turning the heat down to a simmer, putting a lid on it, and letting this cook for about 45 minutes. As your rice is cooking, step number 2 is getting your winter squash prepared. First, you want to make sure your oven is preheated to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. Next, you want to prep your baking sheet. I've got a baking sheet lined with parchment paper. You could use foil, you could use a silicone mat, or you could use nothing and just roast your squash directly on your baking sheet. For this recipe, you can use any type of winter squash. I have a delicata squash here, and I have an acorn squash. Other variations include a carnival squash, a butternut squash. One thing to note is with your butternut squash, you want to make sure that you're peeling that first. Other variations, like what I have here, you can actually eat the skin, so I'll be leaving that on. So let's get prepped. I'll be cutting this up into pieces, removing all of the seeds, and cutting this into small pieces, placing them directly on the baking sheet before we season. Let's get going. Once your winter squash is all prepped, before we start seasoning, I want to pass along a couple tips for even cooking. Number 1, you want to make sure that all of your pieces are generally the same size. This will make sure that they'll all cook at the same rate. Number 2, you want to make sure that they are all spread out in an even layer. If they're all jumbled on top of one another, they won't have all of that direct surface area touching the bottom of the baking sheet. So we want to make sure they're evenly distributed in a single layer and not on top of one another. So once everything is laid out, let's start seasoning. The first thing we're going to add is a little bit of salt to taste. I'm doing this directly on my baking sheet just for easy cleanup, but if you want to start by dressing all of your winter squash pieces in a bowl and giving them a mix and then dumping them on your baking sheet, you could do that too. So a little bit of salt. I have here some balsamic vinegar, and then a little bit of olive oil, just to make sure everything adheres together. Using your hands, we love getting dirty. We're going to mix until everything is combined and well dressed. Once all of your winter squash pieces are evenly dressed and laid out on the baking sheet, it's time for the oven. We'll be roasting for 20 to 30 minutes, looking for when all of your squash is evenly brown and crisp. Halfway through, you want to check them out and just give them a stir to make sure that all sides are evenly baking. So let's pop it in the oven. I'll see you in a little while. While your rice is cooking and your squash is roasting, let's put together the dressing for this really wonderful winter salad. It uses simple ingredients, and this is the type of dressing that you can use to dress any winter salad or grain salad. The first thing that we'll need is some fresh lemon juice. You need 2 tablespoons. I always recommend, when you can, using freshly squeezed lemon juice or lime juice. The brightness just gives so much wonderful flavor. So for 2 tablespoons, we'll be using the whole lemon. If any seeds happen to get inside, just fish them out. I've got a couple stragglers here. Next, we're adding 1 teaspoon of Dijon mustard. You can use any mustard that you would like. So if you don't have Dijon, you can use a yellow mustard or a honey Dijon or a honey mustard, whatever you have on hand. I have 1 garlic clove here. We just want to mince or really finely dice our garlic. I'll be putting this through my garlic press because I want it to be as fine as possible. These are all of our ingredients. The last step is just whisking in a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. And there you have it. This is our dressing. We'll set this aside and we'll come back to it later once we're ready to assemble. In our final preparation for our delicious winter grain salad, let's prep our last few ingredients. The first is celery. We want about half a cup of a small dice of some celery. Once that's chopped, we'll set it aside for assembly later. Next, let's chop up our fresh herbs. You could really use any of your favorite fresh herbs for this recipe. I'm using some chives because I like that subtle onion flavor that they add to this dish. I'm also using some flat leaf parsley, but you are open to use whatever fresh herbs you like and have on hand. I'll be taking some of these chives and just, again, cutting them up into small pieces that we'll add as we assemble at the end. And now our Italian parsley, or flat leaf parsley. All our ingredients are finished. We're ready to assemble and enjoy our winter salad. So let's get going. The first thing that we'll be putting together and adding to our bowl is that wild rice. I love this recipe because once we mix everything together, before we top our greens with the salad, anything you don't use today, you can save for the future, which means this recipe is great for leftovers. Next to our bowl, we'll be adding our winter squash. So you can see it roasted up nice and brown and it's fork tender. Next, let's add that celery and herbs that we prepped just a little while ago. Remember, this is flat leaf parsley and some chives. You can use any herb that you like and have on hand. Finally, we're going to top this with our dressing. Just some fresh lemon juice, garlic, Dijon mustard, and some olive oil. Grab your spoon and now let's mix. Once everything starts to get incorporated, we're going to finish this with a little bit of salt and ground black pepper to taste. It already smells so good. Before we top this, you want to give this a taste to see if it needs anything else. This is always the hard part. So delicious. Okay, let's get this assembled. Grab your favorite salad bowl and start by placing your greens inside. Remember, I'm using a mix of greens, so you can use anything that you'd like. Arugula, spinach, kale, cabbage would even be good for this recipe. Then we're gonna just place our grain salad right on top. I like to serve this while my grains and my squash are still a little bit warm. I think that combination of warmth with the chill of the lettuce is a really nice complement. You can top it with some fresh herbs just to give this a little bit of a garnish, or just enjoy right away. That lemon dressing gives such a brightness, and the fresh herbs just really brighten it up, especially as we enjoy this in the winter months. So I hope you enjoyed this recipe. I hope you make it on your own. The full recipe will be located on our website and at our Plantuary website, uniteforher.org/plantuary. Bon appetit.